Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar. There's a few people to be trickling in, so I'm going to kind of let them come in over the next minute or so. I'll give you a bit of a synopsis of the entire process here, what we're doing. First of all, know that this is the second of 4 webinars that I'm doing. The first one went out a few days ago, and that was on how to get a solid number. If you missed that one, then definitely check it out. We'll send you guys a link for that. It was a really, really amazing training. The guys that were at it really, really loved it. And obviously, getting a solid number is a huge part of success in game and with women, especially with day game. Because a lot of times in day game, you are going to be getting a lot of numbers. This one's going to be about finding the girl's blueprint, which we'll go into in some crazy depth. This is about figuring out what's particular about that one girl that sets her apart. And this is actually something I'm really excited to talk about because it's a huge part of my game and a huge thing that I think that I do that sets me apart from a lot of other guys. The other ones coming up are, we're going to do, the third one will be about attraction lines and making the girl chase. So ways to convey high status, ways to attract the girl without being try hard or being gimmicky or like dancing monkey in any way. So that's a really, really big one. I think pretty much anybody who's in an intermediate stage really, really needs that one. And actually you guys are a beginner as well, because then you're probably not doing the attraction stuff at all. Intermediates are probably doing it wrong. And then obviously advanced guys will just learn some nuance and whatnot. And then the final one will be the A to Z guide of exactly how to get a girlfriend from day game. And that should be pretty special as well. I have a lot of really good stuff lined up for that one. So I encourage you guys, tune in for the upcoming ones as well. They're going to be really, really pretty epic, and I'm putting a ton of time and energy, and it's basically the only time you're going to see me breaking down live infield for you guys in a free context, at least. I mean, if you were to come to a hot seat or another paid product, but in a free context is pretty much the only way you're getting it. So definitely tune in for those. All right. I think most of the people that are going to be here are probably here right now. So I'm going to crack into this particular topic. And what I want to start with is the idea of what is a blueprint, right? What is a blueprint? And I want to start out by saying that all girls are kind of the same and all girls are kind of different, okay? And when we learn game in general, what we're learning in a very broad sense is how to deal with the general girl blueprint, right? Girls have their particular proclivities. Like they, for the most part, they like sex but don't want to be perceived as slutty. They are typically risk averse in certain ways and willing to engage in very risky behaviors in other ways. They respond to certain types of general value and social status, etc. So these are all general game concepts, and that's sort of like taking the most broad blueprint, which is what is a woman? What is the experience of being a woman? But within that blueprint, within that life experience of being a woman, there are many different types of experiences that any particular woman might have had. So, for example, if someone was raised very wealthy and went to the best schools, they've had one particular life experience. If someone came to this country with nothing and had to kind of bootstrap themselves up, they've had a very different life experience. And their view of the world, their view of what's valuable, their view of what's possible will all change based on that. Also, their view of what they're entitled to and what they deserve will definitely change. So these are types of things you want to be playing into and taking into account when you are talking to girls. So basically to highlight what is someone's blueprint, well, there are a few factors. The first is, what is their life experience, which is what I've kind of gotten into here, right? Who did they grow up with? Who were their parents? How wealthy were they? How poor were they? What culture did they come from? If they came from an American culture versus like a Latin culture versus an Asian culture, etc. And that's getting into the second one, which is their cultural and family history. Right? Were they raised by a single parent or by 2 parents? Were they raised, very traditional, religious? Were they raised with like science as their religion? Various things like that. So that's going to play into someone's life experience. And then the next thing that I want to talk about, and we'll get to this sort of towards the end of this webinar, is that people are different in different environments. So it's quite possible that someone's life experience is very conservative and very sheltered, but if they're on vacation in Vegas, or they're on spring break in Mexico, something like that, it's very likely that in that particular context, they may be acting through a very different set of expectations because they're on vacation, because there's a situational expectation. And so that's another part of the blueprint, is not just their global blueprint, but what is their blueprint at this exact moment. So we'll start talking about that a little bit more as well. But just to give you kind of an idea of why blueprint is important and what it means to be communicating to someone's blueprint, I'm going to show you guys a little video clip here. And this is an interesting video clip. This is from the 1990s. It's actually an American Express commercial from the 90s with Jerry Seinfeld in it. Basically what's happening here is he is in England and he's trying to tell jokes, and the English people don't get his jokes because he's not communicating in a way they understand. He's communicating as an American, and they are English, right? And so I'll show you this clip real fast just to illustrate the idea of why Blueprint is important on sort of a very global, not even a game-related scale, and how important it is to be communicating with people in a way that they particularly understand. So give me a second, I'll pull up that clip for you guys.
So I got off the elevator and said, "What is this, the 7th inning stretch?" American Express. Let's do the whole country. I'm a little light on the lingo.
Get the full gator down the front with me.
All right.
We've got courgette pasties, bangers and mash, pumpkin sweet and lovely toasted out.
That was a wicked googly. So I took the butchers up the apples and pears and said, "What is this, the tea interval?" All over the world, you can do more with the American Express card.
So as you can see there, obviously when he's communicating in a way they don't understand, nothing's really being communicated. You're missing the essence of what's going on. But then once he's able to talk their language, once he's able to speak in a way they understand, then it makes a lot more of a connection, and there's a lot more going on there. And especially when we're talking to women, understand that it is emotional communication. And so a lot of emotional communication does have to deal with their cultural iconography and their past experience. It has to do with what they assign value to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very, very critical. They're basically, as you're starting to figure out someone's blueprint, there's essentially 3 different ways that you're going to start gathering information. The first way is what I call assumed information. And that's where you start just kind of looking at them and maybe stereotyping. For example, if you saw, this is for Americans, this is an American context that I'm going to give you, but say in the United States, you saw a girl who was Asian, dressed very conservatively, wearing glasses, nose in a book, maybe even the book has Asian characters on it instead of English ones. You might probably assume that this girl is maybe first or second generation American, that she probably does speak an Asian language. She probably follows a lot of Asian culture. So she's more likely to be more quiet. She's more likely to think about things like honor and saving face, those kind of things, etc. And so the way you might approach her would be maybe less in your face and less like loud and raucous than the way you might approach someone who is, say, blonde girl listening to our iPod, dressed in bright colors, tight-fitting clothes, revealing, etc. That girl you'd maybe take more of like a badass approach. And basically what you're looking at here is that in general, if we look at the general girl blueprint, there's this ratio of sort of like everybody needs value and comfort. In this case, we'd be assuming from the get-go that the newly Americanized Asian girl probably needs a bit more comfort in her approach, in the approach to her, I mean, versus like the very like blonde bombshell American girl probably needs a high value approach because she's probably, those are the type of guys that she's used to, and you're not really going to shock her with very much. So that's the first one, is assumption. Now, assumption is the weakest form of information, but it's what you start with. You go in and you're going to have an assumption about what this girl likely is based on her appearance, her carriage, that sort of stuff. The next is observation. So as you're talking to her, you're going to observe that she uses certain words, she speaks in certain ways, she seems to really like certain ideas, or you'll notice that when that she responds to you in a very loud way. So if she's louder, you can probably be louder. If she's more feisty and sort of like gives a lot of shit tests, you can tend to banter more with her. So the next one is observed. And then the third level of information is tested information. And that's actually the best type of information, right? That's what you really want to get to, is where you've tried a particular type of approach or you've tried a particular type of communication and it particularly worked or didn't work. And obviously if it works, you want to keep doing it. If it doesn't work, you want to stop doing it. And actually at the end of this webinar, I'm going to show you a piece of infield footage where I'm doing exactly that. There's this girl that's like, I try a few different approaches, it doesn't work. And then when I sort of hit the right sort of way of communicating with her, sort of the right sort of channel into her blueprint, then it starts to get really good and you can see the set progresses very nicely. So we'll get to that third. But understand that there are those three types. There's assumed information, observed information, then tested information. And you want to rely more and more on the tested information. So if you go in and you observe and you assume that she's going to be a particular way, and then your observation is different, you should immediately change and go with the observed information. If you test and find out it's different, go with the tested information. All right, to further highlight the idea of blueprint and to give sort of like the ideal, like the man's dream scenario of what we wish blueprint was in a way, I'm going to show you a clip from the movie Groundhog Day. For those of you who are not familiar with this movie, maybe like it's a bit of an older movie, or a lot of people that are not American might not be so familiar. The idea of this movie is Bill Murray, the guy in the movie, is waking up into the same day over and over and over again. So he wakes up and the events of that day are going to repeat exactly for everyone else. And he can change his actions, but he's going to get the same results from his actions over and over again. And so Angie McDowell character is his love interest. And he's basically courting her, but what's happening is every time he makes a mistake, he's able to go back to the drawing board, start over, and try something different. And so what he's doing literally in this clip is figuring out the exact right words, the exact perfect sequence of words, phrases, and actions to make her fall in love with him. So it's a pretty interesting example of what blueprint could be if you had that superpower. So I'm going to show you that clip right now. All right, so you can see there very clearly if you had that kind of superpower where you could just go in and test exactly what it is you want to say to the girl. That's Hollywood's interpretation, but it's pretty plausible that if you could do that, you would get some really, really good results. And that's the epitome of that tested information. He literally gets to test every single step of the way to find out exactly what was the right thing to do. So that's the ideal scenario. In the real world, we don't quite get to do that. But the interesting thing is, we can test, because we can test, instead of the exact lines, we can test the formats of lines, we can test the general forms of communication. And the great thing is that the more you do this, the more you're going to sort of like develop, I call it like the encyclopedia, which is you've talked to so many girls that you really start to understand exactly what it is that any particular girl is looking for. All right, so let's get into right now kind of exactly what it is a blueprint is, how you can find it out, what kind of questions you should be asking, etc. Okay? So the first one, for assumed information, you should be asking, what is her demographic? Okay, what is her culture? Does she seem rich or poor? Does she seem educated, not educated? How old is she? That's a big one, right? An 18-year-old versus a 30-year-old woman. Very, very different scenarios. So you want to be looking at these different types of things and starting to assess it. Now, understand that regardless of whatever her blueprint is, you still need to be an attractive man. There's still like the general girl blueprint, and there's still generally the idea that you want to be self-amusing, conveying yourself, those kind of things. If you go too far in the direction of like catering to everything she wants, that's not going to work either. You still need to be an attractive man. You still need to like hit all those general like female switches. That's very critical, and that should be first and foremost. But at an advanced level, if you can communicate to her in a way that she understands more, obviously it's going to work better. So first is, what's her demographic, okay? Also, you could look at like the way she's dressed. What does that convey about her? Is she listening to a particular type of music? Those kind of things. And you'll sort of, again, categorize, right? If a girl looks like is in a yoga pants, like carrying a yoga mat, what can you assume about her? You could assume she probably works out, especially if she has a good body. You might assume she's like somewhat spiritual, etc. You might look at like her makeup situation and see if she's like the type of girl that's doing yoga to look good, or if she is very spiritual about it, etc. You can start making these assumptions, and then when you start talking to her, you'll have a very good idea what topics are going to relate well to her. Now, again, I don't recommend changing who you are for her, but if you have particular characteristics, say for example, you do have a spiritual side and you also have a very capitalist side. For the girl who's yoga spiritual girl, you might want to tell her more about your spiritual side first and then hit the capitalist side later, right? So that's a general idea of how you might go about it. So first is, what's her demographic? Second one is, you say, what is unusual or special about her, right? Does she have some kind of like odd piece of attire? Does she use a weird phrase? There's one example that I have in my hot seat where the girl says, I'm 5'4", that's average height for an American woman. At this time, I'm making fun of her for being short. And she goes, I'm 5'4", that's average height for an American woman. Now look at that phrase. That's a really interesting phrase. Right? She didn't say, no, I'm normal height, or no, I'm not short, or something like that. She gave a specific height, a specific demographic, and gave a full sentence, etc. So to me, what it said was a few things. It said she's educated, and it said she likes to fit in. And she was probably good at school. Also, this was in Boston, where there's a lot of really good colleges. So I assume she'd gone to a pretty good college. That's a lot of information to be using about this girl, right? And basically she's saying, I value fitting in, but I value being good at what you do within that fitting in context. So she probably is gonna have some kind of a job that is corporate in some way, or she's probably not a CEO, but she probably has some kind of job where being intelligent is valued, et cetera. And she probably has stood out in a lot of things and not really been, just been average, even if she is fitting in. She's fit in, but been above average. So my immediate response was, if you're average in any way, we're not gonna get along. And it immediately just completely just knocked her on her ass, because she hadn't thought of it that way. I basically reframed her blueprint in such a way that not fitting in was value, in such a way that she had to impress me, and in such a way that I was doing what she was doing, but even better. And from that moment on in the set, she started to really, really chase me. Okay, so that's an example of taking some little unusual thing she did, understanding what it means, and going to the next level with it. So that's when you look at is what's unusual about her. And this could be her dress or her style, as I mentioned. It could be her manner, her word choice, right? If instead of someone saying I think that's good, if they say that's exquisite, what does that say? It probably says they're educated. It probably says they like words. It probably says they're in something of a playful mood, right? They're in sort of a good demeanor, that sort of stuff, right? So you can imply a lot from a little. And the more that you understand the person you're talking to, the better you're going to do, right? Again, you're communicating with her. Remember that Jerry Seinfeld clip? It's I can be as American as I want, but if she's British and she doesn't understand me, there's a communication gap. My personality is not being conveyed as effectively as it would if I was communicating, if I was speaking her language. And then the last is the conversational content. What topics of choice are her, what is she choosing to talk about in the conversation, right? A big one for me, I live in Vegas, is I'll screen a lot to see how much they're in the Vegas mood, right? So I'll be I think we should just have fun and let the grown-ups handle the serious stuff. Or I'll be I'm never gonna see you after tonight, so that means we can do anything together and it won't matter. Those sorts of things. And these are very, very key ideas that I wanna have come up in the conversation, right? I wanna be paying attention to her vibe. Okay, so very, very critical that you be in that mindset. Sorry, someone just came in, but we'll proceed in a second. So okay, again, dress and style, choice of words, and then conversational content. What is she talking about? If she's talking about adventure, you want to play into adventure. If she's talking about topics of high level intelligence, then maybe you want to be more intellectual with her. If she swears a lot, you can swear more and you can take things less seriously. So these are the type of things you want to be looking at. But we want to go one level deeper though. We don't want to just look on the surface. We want to get really deep and really hit home. So the next step is not just what's unusual about her, but what does this imply, okay? So what does this imply? If the girl is using educated language, what does it imply? It might imply that she went to good schools. It might imply that she values education and intellect. It might imply that she was raised with very loving parents that support her. It may or may not in that particular case, but it's an assumption that may be true. All right, so what does this imply? Okay, and then you want to be thinking the following questions. These are very important to think about, okay? First, what is true? What are the facts of her life? Secondly, what does she wish was true? Right? What does she wish was true? A lot of times a girl may not be that smart, but she wishes she was smart. Or a lot of times the girl is very uptight, but she's on vacation, she wants to be adventurous, and if you can bring that adventurous side out of her and encourage it, it'll really spark to life. Okay, so not only what is true, what does she wish was true? And the third is, what is temporarily true? What is situationally true? Right? Again, that's the vacation thing. Or for example, maybe she is very outgoing and spontaneous, but at this particular moment she's with her family, and so she's going to be very conservative in that particular context. So what's temporarily true? What's true in this situation? Or maybe she's normally very outgoing, but she's on her way to a job interview, and in this moment she's just in a hurry and she's focused on that, but at a later time, she would be a different way. So understand what's temporary and what's permanent as well. And then the next one is what led to this? What is the background? Was she picked on in school? Was she popular in school? Was she, raised by very loving parents who doted on her and gave her very high self-esteem? Was she did she have like a father that was never around and she's craving like male attention and will chase very hard, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all various characteristics that you want to look at as well, okay? What I'm going to show you now is a little piece of infield that I think is really, really excellent for demonstrating blueprint. This is actually a girl from Miami. She's actually a professional model. And basically what you're going to see is the way this set has gone, it's been largely like platonic at the start. And then I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to use some of those attraction lines and really sort of like make it personal to her and really get her chasing me. And that's, again, what we'll talk about in the next training. Training number 3 will be all about that, the attraction lines, how to get the girl to chase, those kind of things. So I'm just getting to that stage. And then basically she's going to tell me exactly what her blueprint for an attractive man is. And then she's going to ask me the question related to it right afterwards. This is a little bit like if the teacher were giving you a test and said, here's all the answers for the test, now here's the test. You'd be an idiot if you didn't ace that test. And similarly, because of the information she gave me, she told me exactly how to utilize her blueprint, exactly how to communicate with her in the most effective way possible. So without further ado, let's crack into that particular piece of footage and break it down for you. Hey. Hi. I don't like staring into the sun, but you guys are cute. Hi. It's nice to meet you.
Hi,
Nice to meet you.
Anna.
You're absolutely adorable.
Thank you.
I need you. So this is just a pretty standard opener. Basically, what you're doing here is just continuing to talk no matter what. I'm conveying value. Notice that I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't like jump in front of them or like do anything overtly to stop them. I like to open as much as possible the way you would open people that are already your friends. I find that the highest value way. Just get to know them. But I'm already starting in with attraction lines showing intent. You're adorable. And I'm doing it in a way that is a little bit like, not like demeaning at all, but it's not like you're a goddess, it's you're adorable. So I'm treating them as someone I like, but someone who I'm not overawed by, who I'm not massively emotionally affected by. So that's a key characteristic of what's going on so far. Just to come meet my friends for 2 seconds, because they're kind of amazing. Yeah, I think so. Come next month, actually. They're like... Okay, so right here, basically, the girls just said they had to go shopping. There's this shopping emergency. So I'm making fun of the girl. I'm saying like, oh yeah, that movie came out, you know, that someone didn't shop and aliens came and took over the world. So that's where we'll pick it up, is me starting to make fun of her and move things forward. Shop and then aliens came and took over.
Stop. I'm like, wait.
I don't.
Yes, we do.
Him too. It's
We don't fit in.
You actually like believe me for a second. You're
Yeah,
like, wait.
I did.
Whatever. We don't fit in. It's good to not fit in, so.
Yeah, it's alright to look like tourists.
Actually,
No,
I really
listen.
got- I get
I think that being a tourist is a cool thing because at least we're getting outside of our comfort zone experience.
At least it means you have a life where you don't have to be at work 24/7.
Yes, at least
That's
we don't
fine.
have 9 to 5s.
Okay, right there. At least we don't have 9 to 5s. I was kind of leading her in that direction actually a little bit. At least you have work where you don't have to work 24/7, etc. Because I kind of was already sensing the type of blueprint she was going for. But then she says, at least we don't have 9 to 5s. Let's think about what this implies about her and how she views men in general. So for this particular girl, if I were to tell her something like, you know, I work a 9 to 5 job, I'm very responsible, I'm very like it's very sophisticated, intelligent work, etc. I'm dedicated to my company, etc. She probably wouldn't view that as the most valuable thing possible. This particular girl. Now, a different type of girl might. Right? For this girl, what's she looking for? She's thinking she wants someone who's probably entrepreneurial, right? She wants someone who runs his own business. And let's look a little deeper. Let's look at this girl's possible life history. So she's very attractive. She's in Miami with the only thing she has to do is shop at high-end stores, relatively well-dressed, well-spoken, educated. I know she's educated from other parts of the conversation as well. So she probably was raised with some level of money and affluence. She probably has dated guys that have had money in one way or another. She may have dated entrepreneurs. She may have dated professional singers, professional athletes, that kind of stuff. So that's the blueprint. That's the life that she is coming from. And so for her, I want to convey something entrepreneurial. If, on the other hand, she was maybe an immigrant to the country, maybe first or second generation in the country, first person in her family to go to college, had some kind of degree or was pursuing some kind of degree of her own, like teaching, nursing, doctor, lawyer, that kind of stuff. then she'd probably be more likely the type that's going to view having a good education, a solid job as blueprint. And if I say to a girl like that, entrepreneur, she'll be like, bullshit, like that means unemployed, or she'll think that it's unsafe or unstable. So again, you're catering to the particular girl. All right, so again, remember this girl's blueprint is she's looking for entrepreneur, looking for successful, etc. So let's see, I'm actually gonna rewind it ever so slightly and go back, and then I'll show you exactly how I respond to that particular blueprint statement.
Listen, I think that being a tourist is a cool thing because at least we're getting outside of our comfort zone experience.
At least it means you have a life where you don't have to be at work 24/7.
Yeah, so at least we don't have 9 to 5.
I'd be like, yep.
What do you do?
I
No parents.
don't like to talk about it. I run a couple companies.
Like what?
Like I don't like to talk about it, but no, okay.
I'm intrigued by it because
I talk.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by it because people who. What is she saying here? She's saying people who have that demographic, run companies, that kind of stuff, are the people who I really like, the people who I respond to, etc. That's the first thing she's saying. She's also kind of responding to a high-value communication that I did, which when I said I don't really like to talk about it, etc. And we'll talk about this a lot in the third training. But basically, this is that high-value communication I'm talking about, where instead of directly bragging about anything in your life, if you imply good things about your life, you'll communicate them in a much better way. So we'll talk about that a lot on the next webinar. So look forward to that one. But here, yeah, she's responding exactly the way you'd want to, right? She's responding by being intrigued, responding by wanting to chase and find out more.
Motivational?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, well, I've, like this is going to come across really weird. Yeah, I'm pursuing the whole modeling thing, but like, my dream is to be a motivational speaker.
Yeah, I'm pursuing the whole modeling thing, but my dream is to be a motivational speaker. Who's chasing who, who's in whose frame now, etc. Right? So she's fully on board chasing me. And why is that? It's because she has this blueprint for what she sees as successful. I happen to just like hit that blueprint square in the face, and now she's responding. And it's almost like, in a way, it's almost not her choice to respond that way. Right? Now, again, if you had a job that was in no way entrepreneurial, could you still pick up this girl? Yes, you absolutely could. Right? Because there's so many other positive things you could be conveying. You could be conveying, positive masculinity, drive, ambition, like great eye contact, good nonverbals, good flirtation, etc. All those play in. But if you have that added tool that you happen to be exactly what she thinks she's looking for, that's going to help you in a few ways. Number one, that's going to make her automatically like relate to you better and understand you better. But then number two, actually afterwards, in terms of making things solid, it helps her express to herself why she liked you, right? A big thing that we used to have in the pickup community back in the day was like peacocking, right? We'd go like crazy, like outlandish attire. And then just interesting thing with that was it would get you a lot of attention. It would actually get you some level of attraction. But in my experience, it would also get a lot of flaky numbers and flaky results because at the time the girl's very attracted, but afterwards when she's thinking about following up on the numbers, she's like, well, do I want to hang out with that guy in like the huge platform, like boots and the eyeliner and the like crazy outlandish attire? It's like, well, that's not really what I'm looking for a boyfriend. So it was fun at the time, but, right? So you failed to hit her blueprint and you might end up getting some flaking because of that as well. So one way or another, the more you can hit her blueprint, I think of it as sort of like, if you're swimming in a river, yes, you can successfully swim upstream if you're a strong enough swimmer, but it's much easier to swim downstream. And that's what the blueprint is. It's like swimming downstream. It's finding the path of least resistance and finding the easiest way to game instead of doing it the hard way, instead of sort of forcing the square peg into the round hole.
She was already in LA. I'm serious.
We're probably going to go to mansion tonight, just a guess.
Do you have a card or something?
We can do numbers here.
Okay. Oh, yes.
We'll talk.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, I'm not kidding about the motivation. I mean, that's...
Okay. We'll talk.
Listen, I don't even know you and I trust you.
So obviously when she's actually, pursuing me, number closing me, that's a really, really good sign. And that's the kind of stuff you want. We talked about that again in the first webinar, which by the way, if any of you haven't seen it, go back and see it. It's amazing. But getting the girl to chase, getting her qualified, etc., jumping through your hoops. But notice again how once that blueprint was in place, immediately like it snapped on. And the great thing to note, which there's parts of this set I can't show for biographical reasons, but earlier on in the set it actually was much more platonic and much less engaged. And turning on the attraction lines, which again we'll talk about in the next webinar, and then hitting the blueprint really was what made her like snap into like liking me, chasing me, etc. So very, very, very powerful stuff, all right? And again, with the blueprint, what we want to talk about is, here's some more questions you can kind of ask yourself, right? What does she value? In this case, what does the girl value, right? She values independence, success in an entrepreneurial way, values probably guys who like kind of do their own thing, et cetera, et cetera. So for her, that's her value system. And it turns out she values speaking and sales and that kind of stuff as well. So that's cool as well. What does she believe about the world? Does she believe the world is a friendly place or an unfriendly place? This girl probably believes it's a friendly place full of possibilities. Usually people who like entrepreneurial things, are into taking risks, doing new things, etc. They believe the world's a fun, safe place. People that believe the world's like a very dangerous, dark place will be very cautious, won't take a lot of risks, will pursue the safe route, right? So all of a sudden now, if you're telling any story to this girl, you can talk about a story where you're having adventures and doing crazy things and taking risks, and she'll probably relate to it. Whereas with another girl who's more in that like cautious mindset, you might tell the same story, but you might be like, yeah, it was so dangerous, I don't even know why I did it, I was so terrified, etc. And you're telling it in a way that's relatable to her. Okay, so that's very, very key. So what does she believe about the world? Next, what does she believe is possible? How big are her goals? Does she think it's possible to be a successful entrepreneur and make millions and millions of dollars? Or is her ceiling kind of like, oh, maybe you'll make six figures, etc., right? If you convey yourself as too successful to a girl that doesn't believe in that kind of level of success, she might distrust you, right? For example, if I said like, I can run 100 meters in like 12 seconds, a lot of people probably believe me and be like, sure, whatever, fine. But if I said I can run 100 meters in 9 seconds, even if I could do it, which I'd be the world record holder if I could, anybody who's smart knows that that's not possible. They'll immediately distrust me and disbelieve me on that, even if it were true that I could do it, because their belief of what's possible doesn't include that fact. Okay, so you want to think about that too. You don't want to convey things that she doesn't think are possible. On the other hand, if a girl thinks that millions and billions of dollars are possible and you're conveying you're successful because your goal is to make like 50,000, she'll be like, oh, ambition's too low. So if it's not matched up with her worldview, again, you're going to be communicating in a way where the language isn't quite matching. Next, what are her goals? That kind of goes along with what does she believe is possible. But again, the more that you're in alignment with her goals and where she sees herself moving, the more that she is going to relate to you. Next, though, is what is she looking for in a man, right? And this girl basically told me that. She's like, the man I'm looking for does not work a 9-to-5 job, is successful doing something else. So I'm like, well, I don't like to talk about it. I run a couple companies. Bing, I hit her blueprint perfectly, and you see the result. And then the last is, what is her life situation at this moment? Right? Is she currently rich, poor? Is she currently on vacation? Is she currently in like super study, like serious mode, etc.? And that's all going to play in and relate as well. Okay, so very, very critical that you're able to engage with all these different sorts of things. All right. Next, I want to talk about sort of how to convey yourself within her blueprint. Because again, I don't believe in lying. I don't believe in lying or falsifying information. I don't believe in trying to be something you're not. I think that's a very, very poor way to game because, well, for a few reasons. Number one, if you have any kind of relationship, eventually she's going to see through it. But number two, you're sort of conveying to yourself on an inner game level, if you do that you're not enough, right? If you feel you have to lie or change who you are to get girls, that's going to hurt your inner game. That's going to make you act with less confidence, which is just bad for you on a psychological level. But also, it's going to hurt your game because you're not going to have that level of assurance and level of belief that's going to carry you through. We'll talk a lot about assurance and belief actually again when we talk about the attraction line stuff on the next webinar. So stay tuned for that one as well. But understand, again, what you're conveying is always more important than what you're saying. So if you're conveying that you're shady or manipulative or lying, or that you don't believe you're enough without bragging, then that's not so good. All right, so make sure that whatever you're saying is congruent with you. But let's just hypothetically say that since we did an example of the job thing, let's talk about how I could convey my job to two different types of girls. To this girl, I obviously do I don't like to talk about it, I run a few companies, entrepreneurial type of a thing, right? And she's just gonna go with that. Makes sense. Let's say though that there was a girl who was, say, also in college, and she was like very much the hardworking, doesn't necessarily believe in like millions and billions of dollars, wants to get the good solid job type. And I still have the same job I have now. What I would do is I'd still convey what I'm doing, but I would emphasize different characteristics. So what I might do is I might ground the job onto her reality. I might say, well, it's interesting. I actually got into what I'm doing now when I was about your age. I was in my last credit of college, and I was like actually kind of scared going out in a job market. I didn't know what I could get. And so just because I was, worried about not doing it the right way, I wanted to take some time and really think it through. So I actually took an internship just to kind of delay the job selection. And it turns out I went across the country, did an internship to learn with these guys who are starting their own business. And I just got really, really lucky. I worked really hard, worked my way up the totem pole. I started at the very bottom. I actually lived in a tent in the backyard of the CEO's house. Worked really hard. Eventually they saw value in my work and promoted me. And then eventually I became relatively, high up in the company. And then years later, I did finish up my college and whatnot. And then I started my own business of the same kind. I just got really lucky that it's all worked out for me. But it was a lot of hard work. It's not something I necessarily recommend, but it worked out really well for me. Right? So there you're telling the same job, which is you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, etc., but you're grounding it onto their reality, and you're focusing on the key elements of it that they want, which is that stability and like seriousness and hard work and that kind of stuff. So that's a very, very critical distinction. You can say the same exact thing to two different people, but again, if you communicate it with the right language, that's when it's going to work out the best. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing there. And then the next thing that kind of comes into it is creating the experience. So girls have, like I said, their global blueprints, and then they have their blueprint for right now. Okay, so for example, a girl maybe, big example for me to relate to my own life is Vegas, right? I live in Vegas. A lot of girls that are very serious, they come to Vegas to party. When they're in Vegas, they're in what I call Vegas mode. And in Vegas mode, they pretty much like do anything, and that actually they can be like goaded or like coerced, or basically not even that. They can be encouraged to open up and really just be excitable because they're looking for that opportunity. They want to be exciting. They want to have a great trip. They want to have stories that they can tell. So it's very easy to motivate them to, hey, you know what? Let's just do something crazy. And they're like, okay, sure, why not? Right? So in that moment, they have sort of their blueprint for how they want the night to go, which is exciting. But a big thing that happens in Vegas is because people are on vacation with a lot of friends, a lot of times if you try and just like talk to them one-on-one, make a like deep romantic connection and pull them, like it can happen if you do a really great job of it, but it's hard to do it that way because their blueprint for how they saw the night playing out was party with their friends, have a great time, go on adventures, and then at the end of the night, we'll see what happens. So if you're in that mindset of partying with them, it becomes very, very easy to get laid. If you're in that mindset of stealing them from the party for your own ends, it becomes very hard to get laid because you're, again, fighting their blueprint for the night. So that's very, very critical as well. And in a lot of ways, who they are tonight or who they are in the moment you're meeting them is actually more important than who they are globally. So really, really take that into account and focus on that as well. All right. I'm going to show you guys one more clip here. And this is another clip of exactly how to create an experience. And this is actually a really good clip for attraction line type stuff and for passing shit tests, which I'm going to talk about extensively on the next webinar. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's have a look at this clip. All right, so this is an example. I'm about to walk over to this girl in the park and start talking. And she's going to be very feisty. The first few things that I try and do are just not going to work. All right, so let's have a look.
I'm sorry, you were just sitting in the cockiest manner that I've ever seen anyone sit in my entire life.
The cockiest? Why?
Okay, so here I come in with something that is sort of like engaging her and making it personal to her, and she basically rejects it. She questions it, right? And this is a very good format, by the way. We'll talk on the next training exactly why this is a really good format and why a lot of times this is the format for how I particularly open. But it doesn't work in this case. It meets with resistance.
I don't know, it's almost hard to just like lean back, feet up, like wave some palm fronds on me and make my day. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger meets Mata Hari.
And here again, I use the same format of making an observation about her that's sort of positive and negative at the same time. It's kind of like a push-pull observation. Again, this is a very good tactic, works a huge amount of the time, but in this case, it's just not working with this girl.
I'm just listening to music.
Right, so I put in a particular frame. I'm saying this is the frame that we should be engaging through, and she says, I reject your frame. I disagree.
Hi.
Hi.
What?
So now I try a different approach, which is the social courtesy approach. Right now, the problem with this one is that it will get me in, but it's not very man to woman. But at least it will continue the interaction, it'll buy me some time, etc. So what I did is I noticed that one particular thing wasn't working, and so at that moment, I stopped doing it and started doing something else that maybe had a chance of working.
Very businesslike.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. Who are you? I'm Todd.
So now I'm trying another frame, which is challenging her. And she comes back with, who are you? Challenging me back. So she's kind of rejecting that frame. Although this does tell me a little bit of her blueprint, because now I know that she's feisty and is going to banter. So I know that provoking banter is not a bad thing with her. And I know that probably there's a lot of leverage in challenging her and passing shit tests as soon as she'll allow me to do so.
It's a boy. I think I'm special, but I leave that open to your judgment. I try not to sell myself. Huh?
Are you here alone?
I am. Just walking through.
Okay.
So now she's going to give me shit tests, right? And there's a kind of a few different ways to pass shit tests. There's ignore, there's misinterpret, and there's agree and exaggerate. We'll talk about that in a lot more depth again on the next training. But here what you'll notice is if I do misinterpretation, which is usually the best way to pass shit tests, a lot of times that cockiness, she responds to it with more shit tests and more resistance. So in this particular case, the way that works to pass shit tests with her is to be like fake humble. And fake humble isn't real humble. It's still very clear that I'm very confident. So it's not low value. But it's just, again, what is she responding well to? When I do the misinterpretation, she responds poorly. When I do the fake humble, she responds well. So it would be silly for me to keep misinterpreting. It'd be like banging my head against a wall over and over again when I'm just getting a bigger and bigger bruise.
I'm just wondering if your friends told you to come over here or something.
I don't have any friends. I'm very shy.
I highly doubt that.
Well, I'm not shy, but I don't have any friends. I'm just obnoxious, so I make them all go away.
So see, this works really well, right? I don't have any friends. I highly doubt that. I actually, when I was modest, it elicited a compliment.
Or I seem charming at first, but it goes away.
Okay, and then this was going really well for a second. She was laughing, and then I get arrogant about it, and as soon as I get arrogant, you'll see she immediately puts up her wall of resistance again.
By
It
telling me
fades.
I'm packing.
You what?
By telling me I'm packing, that's charming.
Sure.
And so now we're back to shit test again, right? But here, instead of like getting aggressive with the shit test and misinterpreting, putting it back on her, I just say, sure, let it drop, because that seems to be more along the lines of what's working with this particular girl.
Why not?
Interesting.
Are you charming?
I think that's subjective.
Right, again, I try and challenge her because I saw some value in that. And here she's almost ready to like start qualifying herself, but not completely. So she kind of resists, and we're back to the shit test again.
Yeah, for me as well. I mean, not everybody's into, intelligent, successful, charismatic, sexy boys. So if that's not your type, then I'm not charming.
I think I'm charming and you're packing.
Fair enough. Shall we just go with that instead of doing names? Let's just be like charming and cocky. Let's not ruin this with like names and facts.
So again, as soon as I start accepting the frame, but in a positive way, now all of a sudden she opens up and the reactions are much better. So again, I figured out kind of her communication blueprint. This isn't her life blueprint, her value blueprint, but it's her communication blueprint.
Do you do this a lot?
Do what?
Like go up and talk to random girls?
Told you I'm very shy.
You're a liar. You're a cocky liar.
And I, based on everything I know, I kind of read that to mean her blueprint is she likes the cocky kind of liar in a way, because she's laughing with it. So I know even more about what she's looking for. And again, notice when I am the fake humble, that's when it really works.
What should I do for a living as a cocky liar? I need to figure it out.
Be a lawyer.
A lawyer? Thought about that, but it's such a cliche.
What are you?
What am I?
Yeah. You don't really lie about it.
Wow, so much faith. So much faith. Scoot over. I'll talk to you for a minute. I have to go in a little bit, but you're not so bad.
Well, thank you. That is a great
You're welcome. You really aren't so bad. That's your stop?
So,
And this is just the end of the set, much, much later. I actually took this girl on an instant date, and then we walked back to her place. So this is kind of just the last little bit.
Will they let me into the restroom in your bottom floor?
I don't think we have one.
Sure.
No, I'm not sure, but I don't know.
Okay, so I would like to go for a walk. If I have to, I'll go find like a public place, but come on for a second.
I'll ask.
Yeah.
So again, as you can see, all of the things I was doing were things that plausibly were good game. They're things that have worked a lot of times for me in the past, and that's why I did them. However, I'm smart enough to know when they're working and when they're not. And when it's just not working, I stop. I quit doing that thing and I try something else. Now, I want to give you some sort of like caveats and like buyer bewares and words of advice on this whole blueprint thing. First thing to notice, as I was breaking down that last interaction, it was very, very technical. Like I was explaining to you guys exactly, this is the exact conversational structure blueprint that works with this girl. This is the one that doesn't, etc. Now, in reality, when I'm in field doing game, I'm not thinking that analytically. I'm not thinking that deep about it. What I'm actually doing is I'm just sort of trying different things that I think might work based on my past experience. And it's not so analytical, it's more emotional and experiential. So instead of thinking like this is her blueprint, it's more like I get this emotional feel off of this girl. Or this girl reminds me of these girls I've known before that were of this type. And so I just kind of fall into the habit of however I used to engage with those other girls. So the more you develop your experience and the more you develop this catalog of like different girls that you've known and different types of girls that you've known, the more that you're going to be able to carry it over and use it. And I mean, blueprint can be everything from their global view of the world to a specific word that they use that tells you one little thing about them that you can use to relate. Okay, so it's very important that you understand that it's not a super logical thing, and I don't want you to be in your head about this. I want you to remember when you do game, having fun and doing proper game in the general way is the most important, right? And that's what we're going to talk about again on the next couple webinars is what is attraction game in general? What is it that makes the girl chase you? What is it that makes the girl invest with you? That kind of stuff. And then the fourth webinar, which is going to be really special, is how do you get that really deep connection where the girl wants to like be your girlfriend, right? And so that will bring all this together. It'll bring the idea of hooking. It'll bring the idea of blueprint, and it'll bring the idea of massive attraction all together. And then we'll deal with how to do all that and add comfort. So that's the fourth webinar, which I highly encourage you guys to attend as well. So yeah, just know that game comes first, like normal game, conveying yourself, self-amusing, expressing yourself, all that comes first. But within that realm, the more that you can communicate in a way that's relatable for her, the more you can hit the blueprint, the better you are going to do. So don't get in your head about this. Don't be super crazy about it, but know that it exists, know that it's possible, and know that when you do this, you'll get massively, massively better results than when you don't, okay? So that's a bit on blueprint. The other thing that I will tell you that's really useful, is a good exercise for you guys as you leave this webinar. What I would suggest in terms of conveying your personality in terms of her blueprint, I'm going to give you guys two exercises. First one is think about all the common questions that girls ask you. Where are you from? What do you do? How old are you? Do you have brothers or sisters? What kind of music do you listen to? That kind of stuff. But the big ones are where are you from? What do you do? How old are you? As a man, you should have a good answer to those questions. You should know who you want to be, who you believe you are, and how you want to convey your personality. Because you could look at game very much as how to convey your personality to a girl. And you know those questions are coming. So it's almost like I gave the analogy before of if someone gave you all the answers to the test before giving you the test, that's what this is. You know the questions they're going to ask. You should be prepared for them. So you should have a general answer to all of them for how you want to convey yourself. But then also I want to encourage you to do this. Think about a few different types of girls that you like, or a few different types of girls you run into a lot, and then take those answers and try and like sort of cater them a little bit to that girl's understanding of the world. So if you're like really into Asian girls, how should you qualify like your life story? How should you couch it in such a way that it makes sense to them and is going to be high value to them? If you really like girls that are like in professional roles like doctor, lawyer, that kind of stuff, how can you communicate your life story in a way that's good for them? If you really like model, stripper, actress, something like that, like showbiz type girls, how can you communicate your life story in a way that's relatable to them? And again, I'm not saying to change your life story. I'm not saying to lie. And I'm not saying to change your values either. You still want to convey the things you think are most valuable. but it's very, very easy to know exactly how to convey it for a particular type of girl. All right? So that's a general synopsis of Blueprint. I will take I'll do questions on this through, if you want to get on RSD Nation or if you want to get on my YouTube channel. I'll take questions on those mediums because we're going to be, running a little long here. But I would love to hear your questions. I would love to hear follow-up on that. Also on the replay channel, if you want to ask questions there, that's really good as well. But I'd love to hear your questions. I'll try and address as many of those as I can from those of you who actually have attended this webinar. And I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. The next one, which is going to be absolutely amazing, is going to be all about attraction lines and tactics. And this is kind of the stuff that everybody's like, what is your pickup line? What do you say to her? How do you do this? But I really want to deal with it. I'll deal with it in terms of a lot of specific lines. But also I want to deal with a very holistic approach because I think guys who learn pickup, they learn it really badly. They learn to be really button pushy. They learn how to use lines and tactics to get a specific result, and they become very dancing monkey, very try hard, that sort of thing. What I want to teach you guys is that there are many different ways to get attraction. One is to be high energy, but there's also ways to do it very low energy, very sort of like James Bond, and ways to do it that get the girl to chase you far, far more than being that dancing monkey type guy does. So this is another huge element of my game that I think a lot of guys miss. And to be fair, I don't think I'm that much more crazy, clever and creative and brilliant and witty than most guys. But I think that what sets me apart is I understand the game, I understand what's going on, and I know how to move the interaction forward in the right way. So that's what I'm trying to teach you guys over these webinar series. So again, tune in for the next one, which is attraction. Everything, how to get the girl attracted, how to get her to chase, that kind of stuff. And then for the final one, you really want to be there. That's where we bring all the webinars together and we talk about how to make her your girlfriend, or if you want multiple girlfriends, whatever, how to get the type of relationship you want and how to get the girl deeply, deeply invested with you. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming out for this. I really, really appreciate it. Hit me up with your questions on various social media. You can hit me up again on my YouTube channel. You can hit me up actually if you want on my Facebook page, or you can hit me up on RSD Nation. Any of those are really great avenues. Feel free to ask me lots of questions. If you ask too many, I may not answer them all, but I'd love to hear your questions. It'll help me tailor my approach and help you guys be taught exactly what it is you particularly want to learn. So with that said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys on the next webinar, which, by the way, you're idiots if you don't sign up for. Thanks again.